Yeah. How long have you been writing? How long have you been
I have a story about that. Once upon a time, back in 2009, I was on a round robin trip to go visit grandchildren in both Georgia and New Jersey. And my wife and I were driving along. We rarely listen to the radio or talking books or anything else. We'd rather talk to each other. We're that kind of couple. We're each other's best friend,
that's good. That's so good.
and we have fun with that. But in that travel, I mentioned to my wife that I really want to write a book. And she said, well, okay. And I said, well, I've made 3 attempts at writing a book and all 3 of them failed. I wrote this really good murder mystery. And I was about 80 pages into it when I figured out I didn't know who done it. And I couldn't figure out a way to figure out who done it. And that was the end of that book. And then I wrote another one, real Cold War, you know, intrigue and everything else, kind of like one of Clancy's things, like Hunt for Red October. I was going along that theme. And then Russia collapsed and nobody cared about the Cold War anymore. So I didn't finish that one. But I told my wife I wanted to write, and we made a commitment to each other that each of us over the next year or so would write a book. I'm on book number 8.
Oh, really?
She's on page 3.
Really?
Yeah. So, but one thing is what is very nice though is that she has talents where I don't. She's an artist where I have difficulty drawing my own name. And she does all the covers on my books.
That is absolutely awesome. I
So
love that. That's so cool.
that's
She
kind of
does
fun.
she does all the artwork for all your books, and
Yeah.
that's
And that makes her a part of it. She's also my first line of defense, the first person that reads what I write. And
she proofreads
from
it.
a legal secretary background, where back in the days of carbon paper, where you were not allowed to make a mistake,
Right.
she has a pretty perceptive eye, and she catches a lot of mistakes, which is good because I type in about 50 mistakes a minute, and so it makes it a lot easier for her to look at things, and it makes it easier for me to make the corrections before I send books out to my beta readers.
Right. So you enjoy writing a book. You write on the computer. You type it out like on a
As I
Word.
do, I sit
Okay.
down, I put my fingers on the keyboard and see where it takes me.
Do you
I'm
ever?
what they call a seat of the pants author.
Hmm.
In other words, I don't outline, I don't build this whole scenario out on a piece of paper before I start. I don't do character development. I don't do any of the things that they tell you you're supposed to do. I sit down, I put my fingers on the keyboard, and I see where it takes me. And there are several times at the end of an hour or two of writing, I'll push back from the keyboard and say, well, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. I actually watch the story unfold as I type it. And I think that's the joy of that's the fun of it,
Heck yeah.
is that
You're
it's
tapping
it's
into
not
that.
mechanical at that point. It's just inspiration. And I
Absolutely.
like doing that.
You're
I
tapping into
started this whole
creativity.
thing.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. It's your show.
No, you're the guest though. I was just gonna say, you're tapping into that creativity part of it, and you're really, it's a cool thing. I've kind of thought about writing a book myself. But I don't know where to start. I kind of want to eventually write a book about the adventures of me and my pup Miley. I think
Uh,
we've been on quite a few adventures, and that would make an interesting story. But so
the
that's
only the only advice I can give to you or anyone else who wants to do something like this, who wants to be an author, the first thing you have to do is put your fingers on the keyboard, because nothing's going to happen until you do.
right.
Put your fingers on the keyboard, think about what you want to say, and then talk to it. When I write, I'm not writing a book. I'm talking to the story. I mean, I'm just taking the story and I'm talking about it, like you and I are talking here.
Right.
It's just instead of doing it, then I'm doing it with my 9.5 fingers.
Right.
But
9.5.
9.5. Yes.
Oh, look at that. Holy smokes. What
Well,
happened there?
that was radial arm saw 16 Rick 2. But anyway, that's a story for another day. It
Okay.
just makes it difficult to type. That because of it, I don't have any people's names starting with the letter A.
Right.
So
So you're twice retired, and
yes, I am.
you moved from a city life to a more rural life. Is that correct?
And I left the New Jersey shore as an 18-year-old. I spent 21 and a half years in the Navy. I moved back to 8 miles from where I grew up. I spent another 10 years in New Jersey, on the New Jersey shore, in the recreational boating business, which I really had a lot of fun with. But New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country. The number of people in the county that I was in, and the county was only 800 square miles, was over 500,000 people then. I'm sure it's more now.
Wow.
And I moved from there to a county of fewer than 7,000 people and twice the landmass. But I got tired of the rat race. I got tired of everywhere you went, they had your hand in your pocket. I mean, even to go to and I'm going to use air quotes for people who are only listening, the free library, you had to feed the parking meter to get in.
Right.
And the free, air quotes again, library, you paid for with your property taxes anyway, but they called it a free library. So every time you turned around, if you got on a road, you paid a toll. If you parked your car, you fed the meter. And it was not uncommon to carry at least $100 cash in your pocket just to feed the different things that wanted money as you've traveled around. I got tired of the congestion, the traffic lights, the draconian regulations and laws, and in the recreational boating business, because of the environment that you're in, then the environmental regulations are also through the roof. And I just got tired of it. I started looking for a place to escape. Now, I had a good friend of mine who lived in rural Iowa. He was another Navy chief like I am. He was retired long before me. He was one of my mentors. And I went and I visited him, and he introduced me to what I call rural America and farm country. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea of open spaces and with the idea that you can breathe and you're not bumping into everybody. You don't stand you're number 15 in line at the grocery store. I enjoyed that. So I started looking for a place like that. It took me 5 years. First, as being a typical East Coast person, I looked south first. You always do. And I couldn't find anything down there that was exciting. I did find something that I liked and remember, I'm thinking rural. I want to be away from people, not because I don't like people. I love people, but I want to have my own space. I found a place in Alabama, and my wife stopped me on that. She says, "You're not going to move me to a place that's that hot, that humid, and that buggy." So there went Alabama. So I said, okay, I've got to go somewhere else. I started looking. Looked at Iowa initially, but I couldn't afford to do what I wanted to do, which at the time was to snowbird. Get a house, get an RV, go travel the country, and have an anchor. And I couldn't afford to do that in Iowa either. So I took a step west toward Nebraska and didn't see anything there that I could afford. So I took a step north, and that's how I wound up in South Dakota. I found a house here that I can afford to live with taxes that I can afford to pay and retire at 52 years of age.
That's great.
And that's what I did.
Heck yeah.
And
what's it
my
like?
original plan, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I continue, please.
My original plan was to get the big RV, use this house as an anchor, and then go travel, go see the country. I've 21 years in the Navy. All but the first 6 of it, I was flying for a living. Didn't drive the bus, but I sat in the back and played with the toys. I've flown over this land countless times. I've driven across this land several times, but I've never actually visited. It's Charles Perrault, I think, was the guy that said the interstate highway system is the best way to travel cross country and not see a darn thing. And he's right. Now when I travel, I always use 2-lane roads, and I stop in the little towns and catch the flavor, because flavor is important. Anyway, here I am in South Dakota, and I still want to write a book, because I talked about that. And I love the rule with writing is you have to write about what you love. In order for it to be authentic, in order for people to read it and say, that was a good story, it has to be something you love. You have to have your life, your passion in it. And I love South Dakota. I love rural America. It doesn't necessarily have to be South Dakota, but it's where I am. It could be Kansas. It could be Mississippi. But I love rural America. And I love the attitudes and the mores and the way people think and the way they are here. And I wanted to write about that. Well, I couldn't write a history story because I didn't live here. I didn't grow up here. I don't know the history of South Dakota as well as I would if I went to school here. I couldn't write a documentary because I'd only lived here a short time. So I decided to write fiction. I decided to write stories. And the first one I wrote, play on words, I called Flyover County.
And that's the first book of your, is it a series or is it?
It's a series, and that's not the first book of the series, but that's the first book I wrote.
Okay. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I actually wrote a prequel, and I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
But Flyover County, I took the stories of what people told me about rural America. I took my own personal culture shock and the funny and humorous things that went on with different people interacting. And I wrote a story about mommy, daddy, and two kids who moved from a part of the megalopolis. And I called that Fairview, and I put it somewhere between Baltimore and Washington, but I was never specific as to where, which left me some artistic license when I talked about state laws and things. So they moved from Fairview, which is maybe a town of 50,000 next to another town of 50,000 across the river from another town of 50,000. And I plunked them down in a little tiny town called Helen, South Dakota. Now, Helen's all up here. It's my imagination. Helen is a little tiny town of 300 people, maybe 350. It's got a cafe. It's got a tavern. It's got a couple of churches. It's just a little town in the middle of South Dakota, 20 miles from the next little town.
Sounds like a place I want to live.
And I would. And I took, this town in my mind, I could draw you a map as to what this town looks like. And I used that town to tell the story of rural America, tell the story of people who are, the whole town gathers. I tell a story in one of the books. I talk the story. The main character, Bill Weber, is sitting every morning. Every little town in South Dakota, and I'm sure every little town in Middle America, has some place where 8 or 10 people sit down and have coffee in the morning. And they have coffee and they talk with one another and they talk about solve the problems of the world. And this little town has this, and it's a little round table in the back of the cafe. The mayor presides. He also owns a small engine repair shop, but he presides over it. And they first brought Bill Weber, and he introduced himself. And the mayor says, well, Bill Weber, and he says, well, then you're in the N through Z group. And he said, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, on the July 4th parade, you said we had so few people that we got tired of the same people being in the parade day after day or year after year. So we decided that on even numbered years, the A through M people would march on the parade and the N through Z people would stand on the side. And then on the odd numbered years, it would go the other way. So they're pulling his leg, of course, but it's just one of the stories but you can see that kind of small town interaction. One of the funniest ones, it was a Charles Kuralt thing I saw. There is a town in Minnesota that is so small, the parade doesn't move. The parade stands still and the people walk around it on the block. Yeah, they all walk around it. And Charles Kuralt's talking to the mayor about this. He says, well, how do you know when the parade's over? The mayor says, well, they start moving. It's fun. These are stories that need to be told, in my opinion. They're stories. And so I did it with Flyover County. And I wrote Flyover County again as it's big. It's 69 chapters long, and that scares some people, but each chapter almost can stand alone as a short story.
That's great.
And that makes it more palatable. Some people, Rick, the book is too big. It's hard to hold up. I said, well, they make Kindles, but sure. I had to do what I had to do. I had to take this family, introduce them to rural America, and then I took them through all 4 seasons. I let them see the bright sunshine and the July 4th parade and Labor Day and all of the different things. I took them through Christmas. I took them through a blizzard. I got the poor main character lost in his own backyard in the middle of a whiteout. And I had fun with it. Writing it's a fun thing to do. It's just an enjoyable thing. But that was the first story. The second story I did was the follow-on to that was about Bill's little brother, who was 21 years in the Navy. Imagine that. And he was retiring, but he didn't have a wife. He didn't have a child, and he was a spook, and he wanted to get out of the spook business. So he wanted to do something different. So he descends upon small town America to see exactly what his brother had gotten himself into. And that takes that story. And I'm not going to talk more about that because that's a spoiler, but that's the follow on to Flyover County. It's called the Fred Weber story. I got that. And then I started another one, which at the time I was calling Justin and Natalie. And I've since changed that title. But then I got lost in that one. I didn't like the way it was going. So I set it aside. And I decided, how did Bill get there? And then that's when I went to the first one in the series, Tom and Sarah, and I even subtitled it The Beginning. And that one leads you to Flyover County, which I wrote first. Tom and Sarah, they were living again in Fairview, and they were on the high life. I mean, she was a major purchaser for a multi-chain department store. He was a major player in a world construction outfit. And they were doing great. They were top of the heap. They were in the country club. They were on the A-list for all the best parties. They had a nice house in the suburbs. They had 2 wonderful children. And then the economy crashed. Bill's company went broke, or Tom's company went broke. And Sarah lost her job to a downsize, to a merger. All of a sudden, they had 2 purchasing agents. Now they need 1, and she was gone. And now they've got this house and this mortgage and this wonderful life and the car payments and everything else. And they're sitting in Fairview. And every month the unemployment is making ends meet, but every month it's just a little short, and they have to tap the savings. And that they've been doing this. And of course, the tension in the family gets tougher and tougher. Tom gets a phone call from a great aunt. Tom, I have to tell you, your grandfather passed away. That was special to Tom because Tom grew up spending his summers on the farm with Grandpa near Helen, South Dakota. And he had special memories of the times working the wheat harvest and fixing the equipment and doing all the things that boys love to do with Grandpa. So it really struck his heart. And he decided, I don't care if we can't afford it, we're going to the funeral. And that started the battle royal, and that's kind of where the story starts. But Tom and Sarah takes you to Bill Weber, which is Flyover County, which takes you to Fred Weber, which follows on after Flyover County. And that those 3 together make a great, great, great story, all of their own. And each can be read separately, but if you start at the beginning, which is Tom and Sarah, and you work your way through Flyover County into Fred Weber, you get an entire feel for the flavor of rural America. And again, that's where I was trying to go, is to talk to people about a world that seems to be closing in from either side. It's like the walls are closing in on the attitudes and mores of middle America. Many of the people who read my stories will understand this when I say June Cleaver still lives here. Now, those people who were not adults in 1999 to be able to party like it was 1999 may not know what that means. But most of my readers were able to party like it's 1999 in 1999. But
I was 8 years old in 1999.
Yeah,
I was born in 91.
I was shocked. I was a young man. I was a child. I was in school and I'm just learning to do arithmetic. And it scared the heck out of me as I'm working with my pencil to realize that when the year 2000 hit, I would be 48 years old. It's like, whoa, that's old. That's old. And it really, really bothered me. It bothered me for a couple of weeks. I finally got over it, but gee whiz, that was really old. And, when you're 12, 48 sounds ancient.
Yeah, it does. It really does. I remember when 30 sounded ancient, and I was 18 or whatever. I was like, man, 30 seems so far away. And now here I am. I'm 30 years old, and yeah. And 40's coming up quick,
you got to watch out for those decade years.
So those first 3 books, those sound like, they really will, captivate the reader no matter where you're located at, it'll captivate the reader and bring them into a world of, almost a simpler life. It sounds like, and what it's like to kind of live in an environment where, you know, everybody kind of knows everybody, and there's that small town feel, you know, where, because that seems to be lacking, especially in a lot of more of the urban areas, you know, that we find ourselves living in. We don't even know who our neighbor is across the street. You know, we don't know anything about them. And you know, is that accurate about your stories? Is it
I think,
meant to
well,
pull the reader into a smaller town feel, what it's like to be part of that?
it's both, because I'm an outsider looking in, because I moved here in 2004. I'm an outsider looking in. I know that life that you're talking about. I had one like that when I was in New Jersey. I had a next door neighbor that after 3 years, the most we were was nodding acquaintances. I would say hello and she would nod. And that was about, and I was just on the way back and forth to the mailbox. I mean, it's just the way that was. Out here, it's just the opposite. And I wrote the stories, getting back to my point, I wrote the stories both from the guy like me looking from the outside in to see what small town America is really like, not the stereotype where everybody's in everybody's business, but what it's really like, where everybody just is concerned for the other one's well-being. And then I also wrote it for the person who lives here so that they can, because if you live here, to make it easy, if you live in New York City, you never go to the Statue of Liberty. You never go to the top of the Empire State Building to look out at Hoboken. You just don't do that. If you live in Washington, D.C., you don't climb the steps or ride the elevator to the top of the Washington Monument. You just don't. People who live here in rural America do not know what they have because they've never been, most of them have never left here. So they don't know what it's like to stand in the middle of Times Square and look up and be awed while somebody's picking your pocket. You know, they don't know those things. They don't know the sitting in traffic for hours trying to get to the New Jersey shore. They don't experience those things. So I try to write so that both sides of this equation can see the fun in it, the humor in it. And that's where that goes. And every one of my stories, and I talked about the first three, and
Not to
every one
interrupt.
of my stories revolves around this town of Helen.
Okay.
Helen, South Dakota. Like I said, in South Dakota, in reality, there is a Henry, a Howard, and a Hazel. I figured we might as well have a Helen because it seems they like to use these names for towns. But the next one I wrote, I'll hold this one up for those who are watching instead of listening. Get your fingers off of the title. There we go. Frank Standbauer. Frank Standbauer is 97 years young, and this is how I wrote history. Frank Standbauer is 97 years young. He's the senior most person living in Helen, South Dakota. And I tell his life through his own recollections, his own remembrances, his own background, things that happen as he's going. Everything's told today, but something will trigger a memory, and then I'll do a backstep. And I'll do a flashback to something. You know, he was part of General Patton's walking tour through Europe in World War II. And I tell part of that story, but I didn't want to make it a war story.
Right.
So I told that story in Letters to Home and Letters from Home. Yeah, because you know there's enough war stories, but these were dear Rose. You know, today I can't tell you where I am today, but today was the first time I've had a hot meal in 5 days. You know, those kind of stories I wrote in there. I tell a story of when he's 12 years or 15 years old, and he gets on the passenger train with his brother and 2 young ladies, and they ride up to the big city of Aberdeen, South Dakota, to go to the record store and to watch the movie theater, and to go to the movie theater and watch the show, and to get back because they had to get back because they weren't allowed to spend the night, especially with 2 young ladies. We wouldn't have that kind of happen in 1915. So. But like I just do flashbacks all the way through the thing, and I take him all the way up to a very interesting ending. And I won't tell you what it is, but it's all of my stories. I have to say this: all of my stories have happy endings, because I love happy endings. I've read several books where the ending I'll close the book and I'll go, that sucks. You know, I don't want that. I want people to walk away from my stories with a smile. I want them to escape into Helen, enjoy the story, and then when the story is over, take a breath and go, well, that was really nice. One of my reviewers told me that I write nice stories about nice people, and I believe I like that. I think that's what makes it fun.
There's definitely something to be said about reading a good story, whether you're grabbing a cup of coffee, cup of tea or whatever, and just sitting down and reading a very well published story that takes you to another time, takes you to another place. Are your books, are they inspired? Are you inspired to write about things, actual events in the town you're in? Like, um, are there inspirations that come from your town that you put into your books?
Yeah, well, to start with, I don't live in a town. I live 16 miles from my nearest town, and that has a population of 84. But yes, a lot of the things come from the towns around me. Again, Helen is a conglomeration of several different people. Everybody asks me where Helen is, and I won't tell them.
Right.
Um, Local
Secret.
folks. Well, I think it's this town. I think it's that town. Well, it could be, but it isn't.
Right.
But yeah, the July 4th parades, when I got specific about that, in the beginning of the Fred Weber story, I talk about lawnmower races where they set aside a part of the ball field and they set up the straw bales around so that they had a track and they had lawnmower. I did a whole, it was about 2,000 words just about lawnmower races. And, it was basically NASCAR at 7 miles an hour. And
That sounds like something that would happen up where I'm at, where I'm from. There's some rural parts of Pennsylvania where I'm from. And, there's activities that we do that are similar to lawnmower racing, but
pumpkin chunkin.
yeah, yeah, maybe. But I think the rural environment is super attractive to people that, have spent their whole life in an urban or city setting.
Especially now, Kenny. Especially now. Right now, there is a buying boom going on out here, and if you listen to the newsies, they'll say it's because of the pandemic, and I know more of the opinion it's in the government's reaction to the pandemic, and people are just tired of being locked down, so they're getting out.
Absolutely.
And so rural America is growing. It actually has been growing since 2008. It did one of these. It was shrinking for years. But what technology took away from rural America, the population, in that what a farmer can do today took 8 farmers to do even one generation ago. But around 2008, things changed because what technology took away, technology gave back with the internet and working from home and people doing things. The guy that's sitting in this 15-foot by 15-foot cubicle in New York City and he's paying $5,000 a month for rent, working from home, suddenly goes, home can be anywhere. And for those who are listening instead of watching, I just smacked my head with my palm. Home can be anywhere if you're working from home. And that's what you're starting to see. You're starting to see people. I saw it when I was still in New Jersey. When I left New Jersey, it was not long after 9/11. People in New York were moving to northern New Jersey. People in northern New Jersey were moving to southern New Jersey. Everybody's trying to get more rural. But they're doing it in steps. Well, those steps were accelerated by the events of the last year. And now more and more people are looking at a country scene where one of my culture shocks when I moved here, I went to a local church because I wanted to pick a church to make my own. And I went to this church and I got out of my car. And as I'm walking through the parking lot, which by the way was gravel, walking through the parking lot, I noticed all the keys are hanging in the ignition in the cars. And I thought, well, maybe this is a nice place to live. And then I noticed it when I went into the small town that I live near. And same thing, you park in front of the cafe, everybody's got their keys hanging in the ignition, at least cars that are old enough to have keys in ignitions.
Right.
Something nice about that. And even in my county seat, which is big, I mean, it's a population of almost 2,000 people. 90% of the people let their keys hang in the car. Nobody locks their cars. I know of people, because I won't say this in public, I know of people who have no idea where their house keys are. And they've lived here 20, 30, 40 years. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. See, you move into a small town in middle America, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be here. You just have to be in the wheat belt or even in the deep south. There are certain areas that are 40, 50 miles away from Atlanta that are still very, very genteel. It's still Southern. But you move into an area like this and people will do one of two things as they meet you. The first, they're going to feel you out and figure out who you are. And if you want to be social, you're going to get invitations to dinner. You're going to get invitations to this and to that and graduations. And you're going to be absorbed into the community. They may even ask you to sit on the church board, or they may ask you to sit in on the school board if you have kids. If they perceive by your actions that you'd rather be left alone, you'll be left alone. And nobody will think the wiser. He's just he doesn't hang out with a lot of people, And that's rural America. I have to tell you a funny story. And this is real. This is not in one of my books. This is a real story. We had two young men from Minneapolis move to the small town north of me. This town has about 200 people. And they moved into this house that they had rented, and they built a meth lab. This is back when meth labs took a lot of space and time and energy. And they built this meth lab, and they did not understand rural America. And that's what got them busted. They didn't understand. They stayed to themselves. They didn't talk to anybody. They didn't do anything. When they went shopping outside of town. So they were just two strangers living in this house. But they did, for some reason, I understand why, they bought the local newspaper. And the little kid, this is still rural America, kid on bicycle delivering newspapers.
Wow.
Mentions to dad, gee, dad, I don't know, this house has a funny smell. Maybe somebody died in there or something. Nobody knew these two. Dad called the sheriff, county sheriff, because there are no cops. There's county sheriff. County sheriff came by and busted the meth lab. Now, if these two kids understood rural America, that never would have happened. If they had gone to the morning coffee and chatted up with people and chatted and talked, if they'd gone to the local church, not every week, but maybe every now and again, if they said hello at the gas station while they were pumping gas, when that kid said there's a funny smell, Dad would have picked up the phone and called them and said, hey, Harry, everything over there okay? My son smells a funny smell. Oh yeah, everything's fine. We had a fire, but we put it out. In the meantime, they can pack up and be out of Dodge before the sheriff shows up. But they didn't understand rural America.
Right.
So now they're the guest of South Dakota.
Well, it's probably
that's a real story.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, it's probably a good thing. You know what I mean? That they did get busted. But, yeah, you're absolutely right, though. It's important, that I think the community and being involved in your community is super important, and getting back to those roots where, we're human beings. We're meant to interact and communicate with each other and help each other out. And that has been lost in the urban environment, the city environment, because I think a lot of it has to do with technology. Absolutely. The superficiality, if that's a real word, of society has really kind of turned people into robots, in a strange type of way, and it makes it really hard to connect with people in the city. So it's just kind of, turning into this whole, don't talk to anybody, you open the door for somebody going in a gas station and
you get the hairy eyeball.
Yeah. You get the hairy eyeball. Absolutely. And
I have a theory about that.
I have a
theory. Everybody needs space. Everybody needs space. You need an X number of feet or whatever it is around you that you can live in your bubble. Everybody needs that bubble. People in rural America have that bubble. It's around them. They're not crowded in. They're not pressed in. People who live in an urban environment have to make that bubble up here. So I might be standing next to somebody in the elevator, but he's not there because that's not my bubble. So I can ignore that person. And the only thing that's going to break that bubble is a crisis. If the guy has a heart attack, of course, you're going to pay attention. But other than that, you can stand next to this guy every morning for 10 years and never know his name because you need your space. You have to have that bubble in order to maintain your sanity. And I think out here, people are more friendly. They're more open. They make eye contact, which in New York is a threat. if they make contact, they chat. As we drive down the road, we wave to one another as we pass, as we meet each other on the road. And we use all 5 fingers, like some other state, unlike some other states.
Right.
We have our space. We don't need to make that bubble in our brain. And I think that's important. It's important to have that. It's important for sanity.
That's a very interesting perspective. I've never thought about it like that before, but it makes total sense. It really does. If you're in that hustle and bustle, you're going to create that in your mind instead, that bubble of space.
Mhm.
Very interesting thoughts on that. Very interesting thoughts on that. So do you think that's gonna fade out though? Do you think that, rural parts of America are going to be become more populated and harder to come across? Is it getting harder to live a rural life?
That's a concern, honestly, for some people. There's a big sign, and I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard people tell me about it. It's on Interstate 90 coming out of Washington State, going into Idaho. And it's a billboard, big billboard. It says, "Welcome to Idaho. You're welcome to stay here, but remember why you left." And I think that says it in volumes. And that concern here is that people that move here may want to change the flavor of here, and I guarantee the people here will resist that. And a lot of times, and myself included, they melted me because I was that hard, crusty, the hard shell person when I got here.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had people walk up to me and say, "Oh, you're the new guy." I had one guy walk up to me and took my hand and thanked me. And I said, "Why are you thanking me?" He says, "I'm no longer the new guy." I said, "Really? How long have you lived here?" He said, 12 years.
No kidding. That's funny. Oh man. Oh, that's great.
I wrote one story. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, absolutely. You go ahead. You're the guest.
I wrote a book, and I'm back selling again. This is Whiteout and Other Stories. These are short and not so short stories. And what they do is they cover a history. It was my first foray into historical fiction. The story of Whiteout, back in 1888, the entire, from Nebraska to the north to Canada, was buried in a massive blizzard. I mean, one of the worst. And it's so bad that people still talk about it today. The blizzard of 1888, it killed several people. And there was a church, there was a schoolhouse down in Freeman, South Dakota, which is closer to Sioux Falls, that lost all but 2 of the children because the teacher tried to get them home. I took that story and I moved it into 1925, and I told the story of a blizzard that matched that. In the morning, it was gorgeous. It was a January day. It was 30 degrees, which 30 degrees in January in South Dakota is like 80 degrees in Pennsylvania. Gorgeous day, bright sunlight, everybody's great. And then the ticker comes across, blizzard warning. And that came through the newspaper office, and the newspaper man's running around town saying, "Get ready, we got a blizzard coming." And they're all saying, "You're out of your mind. You're nuts." But I tell that story and I put it in that thing. The reason I'm bringing up Whiteout and Other Stories, if those people who like my stories, and again, the majority of those partied in 1999, this is a good place to start, because it's short stories and you can get a feeling for the flavor of how I write and what I do.
Heck yeah.
So I'm hawking that one. The next one I'm going to hawk, River of Destiny. And I did this backwards. I took a farm boy and I put him in the middle of Philadelphia. I let him go to Temple University. Drexel, excuse me. I sent him to Drexel University, and I let him experience the culture shock of city living. A part of that story, he leaves South Dakota, he's driving to Pennsylvania, and he stops in Iowa, near Waterloo. There's a Flying J there. And he goes inside to get a sandwich and something to drink, which he would call a pop, which you and I would call a soda. And he comes back
pop,
out.
Actually.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Well, you're far enough west then, yeah. He comes out of the store, and he walks over to the gas pump, and there's this older man in bib overalls with a white beard. And he walks up and he says, "Can I help you, sir?" He says, "No." In fact, I'm here to help you. And he said, well, what do you mean? He says, I noticed the South Dakota plates on your car. And I took a look, and sure enough, you have the keys hanging in your ignition. And he says, there are some people around here in Waterloo, Iowa, who might want to take advantage of that. And I just thought I'd stand here and wait for you to come out. And he thanked him very much and made a note to try to remember to take the keys with him the next time he stopped. And as he's driving off, this man shakes his head, looks at the ground, and says, he won't keep that car a week in Philadelphia. And that's, that's just part of the story.
Right. That's good. I really want to check that out. Where can I find those out?
Everything that I do is through Amazon, amazon.com. You can come in under the easiest way to do it, because it's impossible to remember Richard Skorupski. And I would never ask anybody to try to remember that long enough to go to Amazon to look it up. So just look up Flyover County and then click on the author. Okay. And it'll take you to all of the stories.
Now, what if I'm interested in getting a signed copy? How would that work?
You can go to my website, which again, you can get to by flyovercounty.com, or my name, which you won't be able to spell or pronounce. It doesn't matter. So go to flyovercounty.com. And there is a link to my email, which is flyovercounty@gmail.com. So you can go to that as well. Flyover County will get you to me somehow, whether it's the .com or whether it's the Gmail. And I'll be happy to sign a copy. I'll be happy to talk to anybody else about my stories and about rural America, and even about doing self-publishing and the ins and outs and the nuances of that. I'd be happy to do that. I got one more book to hack. Do we have a minute?
Absolutely. I
got to hawk one more story. This is the most recent one that's been released. It came out in February. And that's Sadie's Way. And this, again, here we go, culture shock. I'm going to tell you a little story. Now, you're going to have to use your imagination for a second.
Okay.
You're a 17-year-old girl. I told you had to use your imagination. You're a 17-year-old girl. You live in a New Jersey town. Big town. You're 3 months away from graduating from high school. You have a boyfriend. Life is good. Then your mother and father are killed in an automobile accident, or your mother and your little brother are killed in an automobile accident. Your father gets a note. Turns out, Dad discovered something when he was working for a company. He saw that there were funds being kited off into an offshore account, and he brought it to the attention of his employers. And instead of being the hero, he lost his wife and he lost his little brother, younger son. And he got a note, be careful who you talk to. So now he lost his job, he lost his wife, he lost his daughter. Now here's the daughter, her life is already in upheaval because her mom is dead, and little brother, she's a teenager, didn't care much about the little brother, but mom is dead. And dad is there. Dad is there, but she doesn't know dad. Dad is just a guy that went to work and paid for things. And then there's a knock at the door, and he says, the agents are here, we're going to move. You have to leave here. I don't want to leave here. I'm going to graduate in 2 months. No, we have to go. And that's how that story starts. And they move to, guess where? Helen, South Dakota. And I do an entire culture shock with that. And here's somebody complete upheaval, no more life. She can't call her. She can't even text her boyfriend and say, I got to go. They took the phone away. She can't do anything. And if she does try to contact anybody, she could wind up dead or worse. And that's where I start Sadie's Way. And I take them into small town America and let them adjust.
That sounds like a really
right now, because it's my youngest child, it's my favorite story.
It sounds like a really great story.
I loved that one. Believe it or not, that's a pandemic. Right. I don't mention anything about the pandemic in it. I don't write about the pandemic because I write good, nice stories about nice people, and I write about happy endings. Right. As far as I'm concerned, Richard Skorupski, the author, will never experience the pandemic in any of his stories. I just won't do it. It was just a dark time. It was a dark time in this country, and I don't need to talk about it.
That's fair.
But Sadie's Way, I wrote in 4 months.
Really?
From first word to the end, and it normally takes me a year to write a book. The Sadie's Way I wrote in 4 months, and not because I was locked down. I live in South Dakota. We never locked down here. Locked down from who? But
Right.
we just didn't do that here. We have a governor that didn't see the need to do that in a rural state like this.
Well, that's good.
And,
You know, that's a good thing.
I mean, some of the restaurants closed for a while, but it was all their personal choice.
Right.
You know, and
For sure.
Frankly, I
Respect
think
that.
that's good. But
Yeah.
I don't want to go too far into this because then I get political.
No, that's fine. You know, that's a discussion for another day. You know, I do try to stay away from politics as much as I can. I have times where I get a little heated and, you know, just frustrated with things, but you know, I try not to get too much into the politics aspect of it. So with your books, are you just going to keep doing what you do? Are you just going to keep on writing? Are you
I love
currently
it.
working on anything?
I'm on chapter 37 right now, the next one.
Excellent. That's so cool, man. That's so cool.
Kindle Publishing is coming out with this new thing called Vella. And I'm tweaked, not interested yet, but I'm tweaked by it. And what it is it's serials. So you write a serial at a time, or you read a serial at a time. And what you do is you buy these tokens, whatever they're going to call them, for X number of dollars for X number of tokens. And then in order to read the serial, you have to deposit X number of tokens to read the chapter, to read that.
We're talking about
and then you finish that
cryptocurrency.
one, and then you have to put more money in the meter to read the next one, and the more. And that's intriguing because the one that I've written right now could easily go into a serial. It could go into a serial because each chapter is like its own short story.
It's interesting.
And this one again is a little different. Of course, it starts out in Helen. I mean, everything does. Everything revolves around Helen, but this I put in 1977. In 1977, and starting in World War II, actually, there were wheat harvesters that would start in Texas and end up in at the Canada border. And they would start in April and end in September. It was just a rolling thing to get the wheat crop in. And I won't go into a lot of detail with that because I'm not ready to hawk the book yet. But I write the story of a combine harvest crew and that journey through 1977 through 1 year. And I'm a chapter, and I told you, I'm a seat of the pants writer. I put my fingers on the keyboard and I tell the story. I'm at chapter 37 and I don't know how it's going to end.
That's great.
It has romantic undertones. It has other undertones too. And you know, I don't write romances, but they seem to wind up in the story.
Hey, that's okay. You know,
I don't sit down to write a romance, but if you have a guy and a girl and they're in their 20s, guess what? It's going to be a romance.
Yeah. Yep. No. I completely get that.
It's going to be something. It's either going to be romantic or it's going to be something else, but it's going to be something. So I don't set out to do that. But there's a funny thing I saw on Facebook one day. And it says, "Don't you hate it when your characters behave like young toddlers and go running off somewhere where you don't want them to go?" And that's kind of what happens when I write. They take on a life of their own. They become real in my mind. They are real people, and from what my readers tell me, they're real to them too. And in fact, I had one person tell me the other day. She said she finished Sadie's Way, and she was sad. I said, "Sad? Why? It's a happy ending." She said, "Because it was over. I'm going to miss these people." And I thought that was touching.
That is. You know, I understand that feeling, you know, when you reach the end of a book, you know, when you reach the end of a series, even, you know, it's like, it's over. It is kind of a sad feeling, you know? And so I think that it's great that you're going to continue to write, that you're going to continue to do what you love to do and keep them coming, you know? I love that. I'm super excited because I'm gonna purchase one of your books.
Good. I'll take the royalty.
I would love to get a signed copy from you.
Sure.
Order it from you directly if that's possible. And we can stay in touch through email afterwards.
We obviously know how to find each other.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I love it though, man. You know, do you write like several times a week? Do you get burned out from it? Do you take time, like, you know, do you separate writing from
real life?
Like, do you?
I am a creature of habit, and it's probably because of my 21 years in the military that everything is regimented. I get up in the morning, make coffee, and I take my time with my daily devotional because I believe that God should come first. And I finish that. I come upstairs to my den, And I sit down and I have a prayer list that I go through up here where I pray for people that need praying,
Mm-hmm.
and the like. And then I turn the computer on. And I check my fan mail. And by the way, anybody who sends me a note via fan mail will get a response because I do reply. I mean, I wish I was so popular that I didn't have time, but I'm not. So if somebody sends me a note, I'll be happy. If somebody puts a comment on a book that they've read on Amazon, I'll be happy to make a note of that as well. I look at that. I look at my personal mail. I look at a few other things, and then I go to writing. And I start normally by 8:30, 9 o'clock. I start working on a story.
So you write pretty much every day?
Almost every day. I write almost every day. I don't write, just about every day. I mean, it's just because it's something I like doing.
Heck yeah.
It's
Heck yeah.
I'm escaping too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I'm escaping to Helen as I tell the story. And I write escape books. One of the best reviews I ever got is a one-liner, and it's anonymous, and you'll understand why when I tell you. The best review I ever got, it made me forget I was in prison. I love it. That's what do you do with that? It's a one-liner. It's anonymous, so you can't say thank you.
Right.
But it was great. It's just
that is great. That you're helping people escape into another world, another realm.
Mm-hmm.
That you've created through your imagination, through your creativity. And it's a place of peace. It's a place of happiness with a happy ending. I love that, man. I'm inspired. I'm truly inspired.
But now you need to sit down and write the story with you and your dog.
I do. We've been on quite a few adventures together, and I would just really, love to write, even if it's a short book. I've never written a book. I wouldn't even know how to go about publishing it, but that's getting ahead of myself. I think the first thing I need to do is just to start writing, and I'm inspired to do that. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. And
if there are people that are listening to your podcast that have written stories that don't understand self-publishing, they can drop me a note too.
Okay.
I'm not the be all end all, but I've done it 7 times, and I'll do it an 8th time here in a matter of a few months. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to do this one more time. Flyover County. When I printed and published Flyover County back in 2012, and you can see it's kind of thick, my entire financial investment in Flyover County was $10.60, and it was on the street. And that $10.60 was because I wanted to buy a proof copy for me to read through before I released it. But that was my total expense. I wrote the whole thing in Open Office, which is a free version of Microsoft Office.
Mm-hmm.
The website is Wix, which is also a free to the user thing. And using a tutorial that is called Smashwords, I learned how to format the book to put it into Kindle, and then from there I learned how to format it into print.
That's
great. But my entire first novel was $10.60 out of pocket. And now I know other people, they will spend thousands on editors and thousands. I happen to have my editors that did this, my proofreaders were my friends. Mm-hmm. One was a legal secretary. One was a retired high school English teacher. So I leaned on my friends for proofreading and editing. And
then, so the publishing part itself
is costless.
Really?
Mm-hmm. If you go with somebody like Amazon. Now, if you go with some of the others, they want things. But one thing for the fledgling author, I will say, any publishing house that contacts you and wants money up front is a scam. And I will stomp my right foot 3 times. Of course, you can't see that, but I did it. Mm-hmm. Any publishing house that approaches you that wants money up front is a scam.
Oh, good to know.
Because they will take your money and they will do nothing. They may print a book and send it to you so you can see it. And so we've spread this information worldwide. Yeah, they put it on their website.
Right.
They're not marketing. They're not doing anything. And if they want money up front, then they're not genuine.
Right. I'll keep that in
And
mind.
it's just something to be careful. As soon as you see somebody want money up front, it's a flag. Don't do it.
Yep.
You go to Amazon, you go to Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. They'll step you through the entire thing, and they'll put the book on online in a Kindle format and in a book format, and it won't cost you anything to them. And when it starts coming out, then they will be paying you. So that's the joys of self-publishing. It takes a little while to get going, and it's a
Right.
big learning curve. If you want to do it all for free, it's a learning curve.
I apologize for that.
That's fine. If you want to do it all for free, it's a learning curve. If you want to write the check, you can. You can. There are, oh gee whiz, the things that have come available now from when I started. There are actually companies now that have covers, generic covers that you can modify for yourself for not too much money.
Hmm.
I mean, you can buy a decent cover for under $100 if you
Right.
don't have a wife that's an artist. Just you don't have a wife that does that. But I say I want a girl sitting on the front porch with her dog,
See
looking
that,
out
and
at the prairie.
that's authentic. That is what I love most. Other than some like you said, a template or something that's
Mhm.
massively used and just kind of. That's great, man.
Spread this.
Look at that.
That's because there's Justin in the middle, torn between two. This girl's in the city, this girl's in the country.
Now it does
And
come in, and
the river of destiny going through the middle.
I love that. Now it does come in hardcover as well, or
Amazon is just now starting to look at hardcover.
okay,
And they have invited some people to get into a beta test on hardcover. I have been invited to do that, but they've also sworn me to confidentiality, so I can't tell anything. I can't talk about it.
right?
But yeah, they're looking at it, and I'm looking forward to that because there's something nice about a hardcover.
Absolutely, yeah,
And the cost wasn't all that much different, so that was kind of nice too.
yeah.
So that's what I got for you, sir.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out. Thank you again for so much for coming on the show today, man. One last time before we wrap it up, maybe just really quickly tell people where they can find you, and your email, how they can get a hold of you, and let them know.
And I'm gonna do it with visual.
All right, that's okay.
Everything keys from Flyover County. You want to find the website, go to flyovercounty.com. You want to find me on Amazon, look up Flyover County, go to the author page. You want to talk to me via email, flyovercounty@gmail.com. Any one of those, you can find me. And I'll be happy. If somebody wants to send me a note, I'll be happy to answer. I answer all of my Gmails. I answer all the fan mail, even if it's just thank you for the comment. But I try to be a little more personal than that.
Excellent.
And I look forward to being able to watch and listen to myself when this comes out. When will this come out?
Absolutely. I'm gonna try to get it uploaded tonight or tomorrow morning. So, because it's going to take a while to convert from the Zoom to the editor, the converting process is really what takes the longest. And I have some other things I need to do today, but I will get it up and uploaded, and I will send you a link to that in your email, and I'll be in touch with you as well about a signed copy of your book.
Wonderful, and I'll be happy to do that. I even have my official Sharpie that
Awesome.
we celebrities use.
That's awesome. That's great, man.
So,
well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with your writing on your next book, man.
Oh, I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to end.
I am too,
because I don't have a clue after 37 chapters as to where it's going to go. So it's at 90,800 and something words right now, and I have no idea where it's going to end.
Oh goodness!
So I know that it's going to end in the next 3 or 4 chapters, but I don't know what it's going to do. It's just, I love it. It's fun to be able to sit down, put your hands on the keyboard, kind of tune into the man upstairs a little bit at the same time, and just let your fingers do the walking. It makes for nice stories. And I love the authenticity of rural America, and I love to talk about it.
That's great. That is absolutely great.
So anybody who lives in the city that's thinking about moving out here to the Midwest, don't.
Oh, that's great. All right, sir. Well, it was an honor and it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
I certainly will. I
And,
certainly will. You
and
have a great day too. Take
you,
your dog for a walk.
thank you. Thank you very much.